Hello, Shazaib here and welcome to Alpha. When the demand placed on an organ or tissue is more than it can handle, it's called stress, and the body can adapt through either hyperplasia or hypertrophy. Hyperplasia refers to the process where cells in an organ or tissue increase in number. Hypertrophy is when the cells in an organ or tissue increase in size. So a tissue or organ might get stressed by physiological processes or from disease processes. An example of physiological hypertrophy is lifting a 20 pound of dumbbells, which puts a bigger functional demand on your skeletal muscles. In response to the muscle cells produce more proteins or myofilaments and get larger in size, allowing the biceps as a whole to generate more force. As a result, your muscles also become bigger and tougher. An example of pathological hypertrophy is when the heart undergoes hypertrophy to deal with high blood pressures or hypertension. In hypertension, the heart has to pump blood against the high resistance, and cardiac myocytes once again adapt by increasing the synthesis of myofilaments and cause individual cells to get bigger. In both cases, there is hypertrophy, but the triggers are quite different. Now, in hyperplasia, there is an increase in the number of cells, and that can only happen in organs with stem cells that can undergo cellular differentiation to become a mature cell in that organ, like cells in the intestines, for example. So hyperplasia does not happen in relatively permanent tissues without stem cells like cardiac, nerve, and adult skeletal muscle tissue, and that's why those tissue typically undergo hypertrophy when they face increased stress. Now there's compensatory hyperplasia and hormonal hyperplasia. Compensatory hyperplasia happens in organs that regenerate, like skin, lining of the intestine, or liver and bone marrow. Hormonal hyperplasia happens in organs that are regulated by hormones, like organs in the endocrine and reproductive system. Like hypertrophy, hyperplasia can also be physiological or pathological. An example of physiological hypertrophy is enlargement of the female breast during pregnancy in preparation for breastfeeding. Hormones like prolactin, progesterone, and human placental lactogen stimulate the growth of glandular tissue in the breast and cause them to enlarge. An example of pathological hyperplasia is having excessive hormonal stimulation. For example, normally during a menstrual cycle, the endometrium, which forms the inner lining of the uterus, grows and proliferates when exposed to estrogen. But if there's an overproduction of estrogen by an ovarian tumor, it can lead to excessive endometrial growth, also called endometrial hyperplasia. Now, one problem with hyperplasia is that it's sometimes associated with cancer. Normally, hyperplasia is an adaptive response to stress, so it's a tightly regulated process, meaning that tissue doesn't grow out of control, and in hyperplasia, the process stops if the stress factors are eliminated. That's different from cancer, where there's an uncontrolled cell division. Now the thing is that as cells divide in hyperplasia, some can mutate, and that's how hyperplasia can slip into dysplasia and eventually into malignancy. While cells from hyperplasia are normal and healthy, cells from dysplasia can have an abnormal shape and function, and malignant cells might not only be abnormal but also replicate uncontrollably and cause cancer. Individual with endometrial hyperplasia that's left untreated can develop endometrial cancer. Finally, it's important to remember that in tissue that have stem cells, hyperplasia and hypertrophy usually happen together when there is an increased stress. For example, in pregnancy, the uterus gets stimulated by estrogen, which leads to hypertrophy and hyperplasia of the smooth muscle cells in the uterine wall. This means that the cells get tougher and the pack of the cells get more numerous. Alright, as a quick recap, whenever an organ encounters any sort of physiological or pathological stress, it adapts by hyperplasia or hypertrophy. In general, hyperplasia and hypertrophy happen together in organs with stem cells like skin, liver, bone marrow, or uterus. Organs that lack stem cells like heart, skeletal muscle, and nerves can only undergo hypertrophy. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.